when you can't even understand your own child's parents' evening, then you really need to look in the mirror and kind of figure out what's important to you. You would see certain political figures come up, like your Andrew Tates, and someone like that I thought was speaking sense.
Even the whole concept of capitalism, ultimately, it is an English-British concept.
But I really want to move to Dubai or Qatar, where people are just like normal. I think that's a good question. I'm going to need to think about that.
I'm your host, Jayden Palmer, and this is Young Right Views. Hey, hi Ben, welcome to Young Right Views. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, of course. For people who don't know you, who are you?
Well, my name's Ben Matthew Saunders.
Yeah.
I tend to go by my full name because Ben Saunders is quite a common name. But I'm British, if you cannot tell, quite southern. I guess I would say my background is I started as a content creator, ultimately, and now I'm more in the political space, more in the right-wing space. My main goals are to support reform and get Nigel elected. And yeah, I've amassed over 600,000 followers across social media since 2020, and I'm pretty much dedicating all of my resources now to helping fix our country, ultimately.
Okay, and I want to know, before we get started into your deep background and the deep political discussions we're going to have, what does your day-to-day routine look like for you? What's the average day in the life of Ben Matthew Saunders?
Yeah, I'm... Funny thing is, I'm quite like a morning person, right? I'm an early bird, but I don't tend to wake up that early. So I'm most productive when I wake up, but that tends to be around like 10, 11, because a lot of some of the other work I do and stuff like that, I work with people all over the world, a lot in the United States. So around, 3 p.m. my local time is when most Americans are more active. The US stock market's opening in New York. So yeah, but I'm up. I'm a big coffee drinker. I swear by that. I never really liked coffee much as a child, and I actively tried to get into it because I take care of myself a lot, my body and things like this. So you won't see me drinking a white Monster or anything like that. But I have a good coffee machine at home, so I make coffee in the morning. Get straight to work, hop on my laptop, check emails, things like that, and then ultimately I'm planning what I'm going to do for the day in terms of content and things like that. I spend a lot of time doom scrolling, but luckily I've kind of reprogrammed my For You page to be more things that I want to review and talk about. So I'm saving a lot of videos and things like that. But I'm home a lot. I need to get out more. I live in quite a beautiful city, but spend a lot of time. I live in Alicante in Spain.
Wow.
I've been there almost a year now. I used to live over in Mallorca, which is, for those that don't know, is the island next to Ibiza. A lot of people go for Magaluf. But I lived there since 2019 and then spent about a year living in Canada with my partner recently from 2023 to 2024. And then moving back to Spain, moved to Alicante.
Wow, I've been all over the place.
Yes, sir.
Wow. And I want to know, I guess, you have this this busy lifestyle, writing, creating content, like you say, a bit of a night owl, I think you would describe yourself as. I want to know about your earlier life, where it started for you. So, where did you grow up?
I'm from a small town called Fleet in Hampshire, which a lot of people only know because of Fleet services on the M3. So that's kind of the giveaway. For those that are from London, I find that people from London don't know much outside of London a lot of the time. But so kind of northeast Hampshire on the border of Surrey. So that's where I'm from. It's your classic small town mentality for the people there. I was quite eager to get out once I was of age. But yeah.
And what was your home life like growing up in terms of your parents? Were they stricter? Was your household more chaotic or more calm? What was it like for you growing up in your childhood? I was
very lucky. I think I had a very good childhood. You don't realize at the time how, blessed you are with these things.
Absolutely.
But having encountered people, amazing people that haven't had such a privileged childhood, maybe, had some family problems, things like that. My household was very calm. Both my parents worked for an airline.
Okay.
So I kind of grew up with one parent at a time, which was a bit strange. So my house would convert into mum's rules and then dad's rules, and there was, you kind of had to wait until one was home to get away with certain things.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah.
Okay, and I guess a bit more on that. What would you say are the biggest values your parents instilled in you? Because that's quite a unique childhood upbringing.
Yeah.
And is there any particular values you grew up in with your childhood that are still with you today because of the way your parents raised you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing right off the bat is my father was always very good at helping me understand the value of money. So my parents come from two very different backgrounds, and without boring you with the entire lineage of my family, but my mum's side, my grandparents who are both passed away now, but on my granddad's side, if you go back a few generations, it looks like there's quite a lot of German there. And then my grandma, she descends from nobility, related to the Earl of Sandwich, which is quite funny to say, and things like that. So my mum grew up in a very London-style household, and my grandparents lived out in the country in Crawley, in a very big house. So my mum was raised. She went to a school run by nuns. My grandparents did very well for themselves. They came up right from the bottom, and so they had a very strict thing. But so my mum came from a lot of background of understanding what chivalry is, how you should act as a man and how you should treat women.
Yeah.
And then my father was more conservative in the sense of he came from a middle class background. Parents worked in banking, so he understood a lot about money and how to be humble. And these kind of things. I think once you mix those together, I think it's quite a good mix, and it's a good mix of ideologies. So,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I found that really interesting. Like I said, I think it's a very unique childhood background story. Growing up, were you always the kid that... How do I say this? Were you always the kid that had strong opinions, per se? Did you always like to have your opinion on something, or was that something that developed later for you?
No, yeah. I mean, I was kind of always deserving of a punch in the face, to say the least. And that happened quite a few times. I was, if you look at my secondary school life, I guess I would class myself as an in-betweener. But because I was in the space of making YouTube videos, ever since I was a kid, I really wanted to be an actor. And then YouTube came around and I aspired to be like, the YouTubers at the time, which was like Zoella and Alfie Days and people like this. And so I was always, trying to find success in YouTube. And that usually comes with a lot of bullying and scrutiny and things like that. So even though I was an in-betweener in the social class sense of popularity, everyone knew who I was.
Yeah.
And I was the kind of person who I was bullied at times at school, but nothing ever really affected me. I'd kind of got a backbone with the whole YouTube thing and reading comments, but I would stick up for other people a lot. So when I would see other people being trampled on, I would stick up for them, and I was very quick-witted, I could always throw a good insult at someone.
Okay.
And I would cause embarrassment for these bullies and these kind of people. So people didn't like that, and when they're not intelligent enough to hit back with something, they throw a fist. Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna speak a bit more about that later, about the type of backlash that comes with spewing your views online, especially politically. There's a whole world. We're going to speak about that a little bit later. I want to know, when did politics first become something you care about? What was the first, I guess, political memory for you?
Yeah, so growing up, I think my father thought it was important that I stay in the loop, right? So I'd say compared to most people I knew, even at 5 or 6 years old, I could tell you about the last 5 prime ministers, things like that. It would always be explained to me what was going on, in the House of Commons and how these, and someone, when His Majesty's opposition would speak. My father would say, "Do you know who that is? Do you know what they represent? That's the Labour Party."
I see. So your family was very political.
Yeah, well, my dad leans into it more than my mum, I would say. Back to that kind of good mix of ideologies and things like that. My mum is a very kind of party person and things like that. My dad is more rooted in the runnings of our country. But I never found much fun in it, really, generally, growing up. It was, I think, how most people view it. It, can come across quite boring, sometimes out of touch. I think sometimes people feel that the things that happen in Parliament never really end up affecting their personal lives. It's all, some material other world. But for me, I think as I started to mature, and it was really when I moved abroad on my own and I started to experience the rest of the world, and because I was naive enough even at 17, 18 to think that when I moved to Spain that it would operate similar to the UK, and then I found out things worked very differently and people had very, the systems worked differently. So that's kind of how I discovered that it's important for political policy to be in place, and it's definitely backed by culture a lot as well, and I've always been very proud of where I come from. So yeah, I'd say it got more into my radar once I moved out and started to explore the world more.
I see. So you've had a kind of this, I guess, growing interest from politics from a very young age.
Yeah.
That's fair to say. When do you think it stopped becoming a simple interest for you and it stopped becoming just a thing to get educated about and started becoming more of a belief system? Do you know that where you could identify that point?
I do. And it happened to me, and it's good to talk about as well, because there was like a genuine turning point for me. And it happened around 2022 or early 2023, I actually believe. So not even that long ago. But very slowly, I'd been watching the Western world move into a place that I just thought was quite ludicrous. A lot of these ideas, things to do with, transgenderism and gender ideologies, and these kind of policies, there were things that it's not that I just disagreed with them. It kind of went against my entire logic system, right? And I didn't understand how we were moving in certain directions where, in the US, you had passports now with like a different gender to like someone's actual gender, right? So I genuinely began to get scared because I was like, this life started to genuinely feel like a bad dream. And even though it didn't affect me personally in my day-to-day life, I just couldn't understand how this was logically happening. So I think, as a lot of people that share our views feel, especially with right-wing views, there's been this kind of left-wing push to silence anything that would cause offence, right? This inability to speak out. And I think I'd felt that at school as well, but I'd never really leaned into it, right? It's one of those things where, I would tell you at 16 that Donald Trump is a bad person. I wouldn't be able to tell you why at all, And I think being able to admit that is important, and, it shows a development of like intellectual honesty.
Of course.
So there was actually one night where I got very, very upset. I can't remember what I'd seen or read, or I'd heard something, and I got very upset because I genuinely felt like I couldn't speak out and the world was going in a direction I didn't like. And I went out one night on my own. I went out in my car driving around Mallorca, and I actually broke down in tears. I was driving. I had to get off the motorway because I couldn't see. I just had this strange reaction to everything that was going on. And I pulled over and I had to call my mum. Oh, wow. And I kind of explained to her that I said, this sounds so dramatic, but I don't know what to do. I feel like the world's gone crazy, I'm a Christian, I'm not Islamic, but I really want to move to Dubai or Qatar where people are just like normal, and that's how I genuinely felt. And, she reassured me in good ways that mothers do. But that is when I started to really seek meaning and really look for what is the right answer here, and what do I believe? And that's what then got me onto things like religion.
Mm.
So I started exploring, I had to kind of acknowledge that I'd always been quite, agnostic, but I had to kind of acknowledge that there are full-grown people that, fight conflicts over their beliefs. We have thousands of years of history. We've built these incredible monuments. I was like, what is everyone getting at here? So I explored that. I'd grown up in a Christian country, so I didn't start there. I started with, picking up the Quran and having a look at that. I had a look into Buddhism and Hinduism, learning about the Greek gods and things that we just know to be mythology and things like that. And ultimately circled around to Christianity. And from there, that's kind of where that's the foundation of where my views have come from and where I've been then more supportive of policies, and I hear sense in people speaking out about certain things. But yes.
Yeah, we're definitely going to touch on the faith side a bit later, because I think that's a very interesting topic and how that relates to your personal politics. So that was it's a really fundamental moment for you. I can't imagine that driving alongside pulling. That's a really almost movie-like moment if someone was going to make a movie about your life.
Yeah.
And you're kind of describing this scene where you feel kind of the world's almost closing in around you with this madness, this illogical madness. What do you think, I guess I'm trying to ask, what do you think were the biggest, and still are, the biggest fundamental societal issues we have today that really got you that upset with how, the West is built today?
Yeah, I think it was the fact that certain things that in the past myself I would have called conspiracy, started to come to light as being true. So you would see certain political figures come up, like your Andrew Tates and people like that. And the way someone like him, who, I feel like could have handled his fame potentially better, been a bit more careful with his words, but someone like that I thought was speaking sense and speaking truth. And it was really nice to see someone put themselves out there, like, especially someone so high up financially as well from this elite world, to speak out about these things. When that cancellation happened, I think, anyone is lying to themselves if they believe that there wasn't some underlying thing there. One, to do with our own Home Office, with the Biden administration. The fact that you can be removed from every single platform at the same time, including Airbnb and Uber, is bizarre. Debanked by everyone simultaneously is bizarre. And then it was when he then got put in prison as well for these allegations of human trafficking and stuff like that. I was like, oh, like, you genuinely can't speak out about certain things. Like, it was enshrined in school as, if you say these things, you're going to upset people and you're kind of going down the wrong route. You should really respect people's opinions and things like that. And then to actually go and say, actually, I don't care, I'm going to say what I believe, and then be put in prison, for it realistically. That's, I think, what scared me and then drove me to that night where I broke down in tears, because I genuinely felt like I had to... we were living under a form of tyranny, really. So, yeah.
So I felt like you couldn't speak out about your beliefs.
Absolutely.
So you're a big believer in freedom of speech, I would assume, yes. Okay, I see. And you've mentioned you've lived in a few different places, in Spain and then Canada momentarily. How do you think that shaped your politics more specifically, and how you view the world, and how you've related that back to your current political position? So
it's interesting because I think people, and especially Brits, when they go on holiday to Spain, everything is so perfect and glamorous, and of course, because you're on holiday, right? But Spain is quite a socialist country.
It is.
They've very recently done this bizarre thing where instead of, where we're at with policy and where the US is in terms of deporting illegal immigrants, criminals, Spain are just granting residency to over 500,000 illegals. This is something that's going on right now. And me as an immigrant in Spain myself, I had to recently renew some immigration documents, and I'm standing outside this immigration office, and I'm in this massive 1 hour long line. And it's just, I'm looking at the people I'm in the line with, and to not to not speak too much on these people, but it just showed the where Spain is politically with their things. And they have a severe cost of living crisis similar to us. They have many young people out of work. They have, a lot of problems with the taxes are way too high. And then here they are granting residency, to 500,000 illegal immigrants, and it recently came out, I think it was yesterday, that they've miscalculated the number. They thought that there were 500,000 illegal people in Spain. It's now looking like there's close to 1.5 million. Wow. So 3 times what they predicted are currently showing up to get their paperwork.
Wow, that's an incredible number, really. I did not know that. As an immigrant yourself, like you said, you're an immigrant to Spain. Where would you draw the line in terms of what countries should accept in terms of their immigration? How should countries define who should they let in and who they shouldn't let in?
I think first and foremost, you have to put your own people first. And I don't know at which point this line became blurred. It's logical. And I think countries letting in immigrants should only be for the benefit of the country. It's a trade-off, right? It's if I wanted to immigrate to the United States, which is technically very, very hard to do, I would have to be providing immense value, right? I would have to be very skilled, be in a position that realistically no American, at least popping up on an application, can do. I think that's one of their policies, that, you have to try to hire Americans first, at least.
You do.
So I draw the line at bringing foreigners in, providing them with better lives, and it disadvantaging your own people. So, and I think me as an immigrant myself, I believe in these things. I accept that I'm a guest in their country, until a point where I may potentially apply for a Spanish passport, as my partner is Spanish, and with having a family and getting into that. But I understand at the moment that I'm a guest. I understand that I have to be respectful, and I understand that there should be a hierarchy there. There doesn't seem to be in Spain. They seem to be bringing in everyone. But if that became policy in Spain, that, Spanish people were at the front of the waiting list for healthcare and things like that, that's logical. I understand that. And, if I had to, if that disadvantaged me too much, and if that was affecting my livelihood, then I should go back to my country and pay taxes in my country, where I can be at the front of the line as a Brit in Britain.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you think in Britain, obviously, we have a big assimilation issue. People coming to this country, not learning the language, not abiding by our values, our cultures, and, even sometimes quite too often our laws, and breaking our laws. How is that in Spain?
So this is the thing, right? We need to fix up ourselves a little bit as well, because it's a very real issue that I believe in. And being in Spain since I was 17, I found myself into a very English community with other Brits that were my age, 17, 18, but had lived there since they were 5 years old. Their parents had a midlife crisis and bought a bar or something like that. And sometimes their parents could still not speak a word of Spanish. I had a close friend of mine, Nathan. One day I think his father lost his Apple Watch or something like that, and Nathan had to go with his dad to the police station and help him write the police report, and and do all of this stuff, and then when he would have parents' evening, they'd have to get a friend of a friend that spoke Spanish to translate. Yeah. When you can't even understand your own child's parents' evening, then you really need to look in the mirror and kind of figure out what's important to you. And the reason I say we need to fix up a bit is there is quite a large community and expat community in Spain of Brits that just keep to themselves, but I think a lot more Brits do tend to speak Spanish than the people we have not assimilating in our country, even if it's very basic. But for me, it's always made me cringe. It's always been a cringe thing. The first thing I did when I moved to Spain is I was like, I want to be a local, right? So I was taking Spanish lessons. I did all the paperwork myself. I never applied for an immigration lawyer. I wanted to understand their system, how it worked, do the paperwork myself. And I've never shied away from a Spanish community. I've always said that, moving forward, if we plan to stay in Spain for the long term and have children and things like that, I don't want to be around any English people, really. This is my personal choice for what I'd like for my kids.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So you've made a real big effort to assimilate into Spain, you would say?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And if you had to sum up your politics in one sentence, what would it be?
I think we should get back to being able to say how we feel and have open discourse and communication with people. And if someone disagrees with you, that doesn't mean they're your enemy. And I think people get misunderstood that the right just want full control, and if you don't agree with us, you can go do one, so to speak. That is not my position at all. I want us to be able to communicate, to listen to everyone's ideas, but be firm in the way we direct things, be unapologetic, and be unafraid to challenge other countries on the world stage. That was a long sentence, but there you go.
No, I completely agree. I think it is very important, especially the freedom aspect. And I think, you're completely right in terms of it's what people get mistaken about the right a lot. I firmly believe we are actually the more tolerant ones. I've had lots of people, me personally and other people in my life, who they won't communicate with someone or they won't befriend someone purely based on their politics. And I think it's very important to have good, clear and good faith debate regardless of your position. So yeah, I completely agree with that. And I know beforehand you were talking about your faith. And I know, it's a big point, it's a big value of your worldview, you could say. How important is faith in your life?
It's extremely important because it holds me accountable. It gives me direction. And sometimes I wake up, especially, being within the political world, there's a lot to digest, right? Sometimes someone might have said something, or there's a certain policy that comes around, or foreign policy with what's going on at the moment in the world, the conflicts. It's never easy as there's one bad guy and there's one good guy. And there's so much to digest and so much history to go through, and it can be overwhelming. And it's nice to know that sometimes, if you need to, you can just wake up and you think, I only have one job to do today, and that's follow him, right? So it's that. But I'm definitely not a blind believer in faith. Firstly, I think with Christianity, if people say that term blind faith, they're misunderstanding the fact that there is a huge amount of historical evidence, psychological evidence of the saints and the apostles and things like that. And like I said, I explored all religions, right? I definitely didn't want to go down one path and just shut off everything else. I seek truth more than anything else. It's not that I wanted one thing to be true. It's not that I felt Christianity was more true because it just felt more at home or anything like that. I really challenged myself to look at all the evidence, look at everything, and draw a logical conclusion. Are the Gospels reliable? Is what Jesus said reliable? And that's the conclusion I've drawn, that Christianity is rooted in fundamental truth. It's, I find, one of the only religions where if you genuinely apply all the principles to your life will be transformed in a way that you can't explain. And I think that then reaffirms the truth of it. So yeah, I think that answered your question.
Yes, it does. And I found it very interesting that you didn't have a prior. When most people, when they're religious, it's because they grew up religious. And I find it very interesting that you took an unbiased point of view and you looked at things very objectively when it comes to religion. I think, is that fair to say? Yeah, I think that's absolutely amazing. And you're talking about how it influences your day-to-day life, if you are Christian. And what denomination of Christianity are you?
So I'm non-denominational as it currently stands. I very much enjoy the the sort of culture of the Catholic Church and things like that. I think it's quite interesting to see the seriousness and the dedication of it. But I think if you really read the Bible and you understand the history of what's happened, and especially within the Old Testament and the situation with the Jews and Israel and things like that, you come to realize that it's just a book of imperfect people. It's that God is trying to get something done, and as humans, we just fail at every opportunity, right? So I think people are led to believe that certain religious figures, whether it be the Archbishop or Catholic priests or things like this, that they're perfect, you know, and they hold this level of perfection. And then when they do things that are imperfect, it kind of knocks people's faith. And you need to realize it's not like that at all. You know, from what I understand, Noah of Noah's Ark was an alcoholic. You know, Moses very clearly had anger management problems. You know, and then you get on to King David and Solomon and all the wives and then the killings and things like that. It's God chose imperfect people to deliver his promise. So I find that what was the question again? I can't remember the question.
It was I want to talk about a bit more specifically about how Christianity influences how you see the world today.
Yeah.
As well.
I think that what people don't realize is our entire Western society is built on Christian values.
Yeah.
Right? And I can speak for hours on the morality argument, right? So people will say, well, it's not because the Bible said so. You know, I know not to go out and kill someone. I know not to steal. Like, these things are just logical. But then when you read about how the world used to be, that line was a lot more blurred. And people need to realize, if they identify as agnostic or atheist, but they say, well, I'm still a good person, they need to realize that their entire culture and belief system came from Christian values that we built into law, and then we've somewhat watered down a little bit since. But the entire West, it's similar to when people say, you know, British people don't have culture, right? And I think it was you that said the culture is what you're in.
Yeah.
It's almost the entire world at this point. The majority of the world is British culture.
Yeah, it is one of the common traps people fall into, and it's, you know, when they say British culture is only fish and chips, for example, you know, and it's an argument of, you know, British culture has expanded so far beyond Britain. You almost become blind to it, because you go to other countries and you see these laws and their religious values, like you say, and, you know, even the whole concept of capitalism. Ultimately, it is an English-British concept. So yeah, I completely agree with that.
I think to add on that as well, I think people make the mistake of thinking it's racism to say, because a very classic thing I think we used to say back in the day was that, you know, we civilized the world, right? And that everyone was, the term we used was savages, right? The savages, and we civilized the world, which is probably an exaggeration. But realistically, there is truth in that when people say, oh, you know, what's the British culture? Like, you guys didn't have seasoning until, you know, until all of that. And I kind of respond jokingly with the kind of, well, we may not have discovered seasoning. I think we were a bit busy, you know, like inventing everything, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. And a bit more on faith and Christianity. How do you think your belief in Christianity has influenced your political standing and your political belief?
So that's a good question, because there's a lot of personal conviction there. So personally, behind closed doors, I will read the Bible and hold myself to a certain standard, and that will be the foundation of my beliefs and how I view certain political policy. But I think in modern day, as a Christian, and I think God has paved the way for. I've thought about this in the past, that people are drawn to Christianity in different realms, and it's based on how you are as a person. I think God understands all of us through and through. So for me, it came from a more logical, educational sense. God knew that deep down that he wouldn't be able to pull me in emotionally, so to speak. I needed evidence. And I think he provided more than enough evidence, more than enough of a fingerprint all over the world to make that the case for me. And then once I was past that line, then he emotionally came for me, and I experienced things in my life that I would only deem as supernatural. It's hard to get into that because if other people haven't experienced it, it's kind of a dead end conversation.
Yes.
But yeah, so I feel that there's this that God pulls us in different ways. Once again, I've forgotten the actual beginning of the question. Remind me, because I do have a point. I was
it's. I was asking if how much Christianity has affected your political belief, and if you could mention if there's a specific political belief you hold, whether that's a policy or anything that is directly because of Christianity as well.
So, so to finish up, so I have a lot of personal conviction with that, but I think in the modern world, and I think God would want it this way, that you can back up any Christian principle, any Christian policy from a secular view. I think that's fundamental. That's something that Charlie Kirk really believed in as well, that if I'm going to come into the room and I'm going to debate you on something, and my only defense, my only evidence I bring to the table is the fact that the Bible says so, you're not going to get very far, right? And if your goal is to progress the country in a certain direction, you need to meet these people where they're at. And Jesus did that, Jesus didn't start necessarily preaching at people, telling them they were bad people, telling them we need to do stuff because the book, the Torah says so. He met people where they were at, understood them, and explained a certain viewpoint. The only people you would see him angrily preaching at was the Pharisees, those that held themselves higher than others, those that demanded that their way was correct, acted in hypocritical ways. That's the only time you see Jesus really flipping the lid. So I think it's important to lead with your own personal conviction, but if you are going to come in from that argument, you need to be able to back up your points from a secular view as well, and meet people where they're at and help them understand the way you view the world.
I think that's very interesting. I mean, I'm a Christian myself. I haven't been Christian my whole life. But I went on a similar journey to you, actually. I looked at things objectively and I decided to become Christian but based on the evidence. And then, very similarly to you, later on I had experiences which don't mean anything to anyone else if I explain them, but mean everything to me.
Yeah.
For me, during that time, I was watching a bit of Charlie Kirk, because obviously he was big on Christianity, a massive speaker across a range of right-wing topics. I know you just mentioned him. When was the first time you came across Charlie Kirk?
Oh, I think he started to pop up probably around 2022, 2023 briefly, and then, he monumentally took off to the point where I think, by the time he was murdered, the left very much knew who he was as well. But he started to pop up with the things he was saying on university campuses, and he just came from a very logical approach, and I very much enjoyed his style of debating, which is answering questions with questions. It's a very good tactic. There's a whole book on that I still need to read. But I think he did the same thing. He met people where they were at. And his whole policy was that if you disagree with me, you come to the front of the line. So he completely destroyed the narrative that right-wing people want to suppress us, all of this. You usually find that it's on the left where those things seem to be true, where it's that, you voice a certain opinion, someone is just going to start screaming in your face. I know that's not the case for everyone, but, the silencing, the censorship, what we saw happen with Andrew Tate and things like that. Charlie Kirk really hit the nail on the head and really kind of redefined what it meant to be conservative and, for him being a Republican. And I think he kind of messed up the balance a little bit. He destroyed a lot of the arguments that the left would have, in the sense that they wouldn't really argue at all. They would just throw out terms or stereotype. And it was him spending his own organization's money to go to university campuses to debate these students, these voters, right? And see where they're at. And I don't think his goal was never to embarrass people or get a one-up on them or, have one of those viral moments. His goal was someone that is on the fence and someone that or either someone that's on the fence or someone that believes a certain thing more left-leaning, having a conversation to the point where they might reevaluate their ideology and their beliefs. And I think he is the reason why the majority of Americans did vote for Trump.
Absolutely.
I think he's the reason why, majority of white women in the US voted for Trump. And I believe it's also the majority of, I might be getting this wrong, but the majority of men and women under the age of 30 also voted for Trump.
It would absolutely make sense. Yes, I mean, he influenced me quite a lot, and it looks like he influenced you quite a bit as well.
Yeah.
Obviously, tragic circumstances. He got assassinated. When that happened, how did that affect you, and what were your thoughts at the time?
So normally, when the news goes off on my phone. And I don't like BBC News, but I have it because they're very good with their live information, When I got that BBC News notification that, something was happening, there was a shoot. Initially, it was just like shots fired at a Charlie Kirk event. Normally with world news, it's very exciting to me. It's very much like how some people might want to watch Love Island or whatever. I like, as the meme is now, monitoring the situation, right? When this happened, I wasn't entertained. I wasn't following the drama and following the story. I was just genuinely sad. And I did pray for him when he had been shot and he was still alive.
Yeah.
And I genuinely tried to make sacrifices myself. I genuinely prayed to God. I was like, you need to save this man, because I'm sure plenty of other people around the world were doing the same. And I was like, you need to save this man. This cannot happen. But I acknowledged God's will at the same time. I said, if he needs to die for whatever reason, I will put it down to your will, and that will be what it will be. But please don't let that be the case, and I will do better myself, And then he died. And I think as a Christian, you have to get over it, and you have to be okay with these things, because if you look at what happened afterwards, his message is so much stronger now. And he is the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing. He's the reason I stepped out of the shadows and why I redirected 600,000 followers. You have to remember that I spent my whole life wanting to be in the spotlight, right? First it was an actor, then it was a YouTuber. I did the YouTube thing from the age of 12 all the way up until 18, only ever got 1,000 subscribers. Then TikTok took off and I was doing that. And then I've had these incredible opportunities. I've been paid by Tottenham. I don't even support a football team, but I was paid by Tottenham to scale the side of their stadium. I've worked with these incredible brands. I'd achieved everything I'd wanted. Sat on I think it's over 25 mainstream news publications now. I'd really done it, and I had the opportunity to keep going with that. And this was important enough to me that I was like, I'm going to destroy my entire entertainment platform that I've built and redirect it to politics and things that I felt that really, really mattered. Because I'd always, behind the scenes with my friends, always been very opinionated on things and things like that. But I never wanted it to disrupt my career, because as a man, I feel a duty to also, look after my missus and things like that as well. And my decisions don't just affect me, but this was the first time I put my foot down. I was like, I have to do this. And that is only because of him that I don't know if I would have ended up in this world eventually, but the reason I'm here now is because of him.
Yeah, I think that switch between the type of content you were doing to move towards politics is incredibly interesting. We're going to touch on that very, very soon, because I think, it's a lot to talk about in regards to that. Very quickly, I want to touch on the subject of Israel. And there's lots of talking points about Israel, of course. And Charlie Kirk was, generally speaking, a big advocate of Israel. Obviously, some people would argue different to the latter point of his life. Where do you stand around the general opinion of Israel in terms of your faith and religion, and also the Israeli government? And where would you stand on that?
So to be very direct, the modern state of Israel is not the Israel that God refers to in the Bible. Israel is a people that still genuinely exist. I think you could argue that some people that are now Palestinians do descend from the 12 tribes. But this modern framework of what a country is and what a nation state is, and we just so happened to call it Israel because I guess it's cute, it's not the same thing. So when a lot of these American senators will say things like, we support Israel because God calls us to defend Israel at all costs, I think God is sat there saying, I think you got the wrong end of the stick, mate, you know. So firstly that, I feel like any type of policy should not be based around those words in Genesis that I believe it is. So that first and foremost.
Okay, and do you think, if we bring it to Britain for a second, and, you know, America has a huge alliance to Israel. AIPAC funding as a whole, I mean, especially after Charlie Kirk's death, there's been a massive boom of conspiracy theories. Even some people saying the Israeli government assassinated Charlie Kirk themselves. Do you think Britain should align themselves with Israel?
I think that with Israel, everything that comes out about them is worth taking a look at. That's what I will say. I think there's and this isn't new. This isn't conspiracy, right? There's I forget the name, but was it the USS Gerald or something like that? The American ship they bombed. Some of the things Mossad seemed to do as well. I think we should pay very close attention to what's going on in Iran right now. It just came out as I was walking here to the studio that the drones, and this is as much as they seem to be saying right now, the drones that were fired over at Cyprus did not come from Iran. We don't know where they came from. Didn't come from Iran, though. So I would just say, in terms of aligning ourselves with Israel, we should align ourselves with Christian values more than anything. I don't think we should have any specific alliance to any nation state, any person. I think we should align ourselves with biblical Christian values and our own heritage and our own beliefs and our own culture more than anything else. So, yeah, but my advice to people would be, don't take everything to be so black and white. Don't ever assume there's a good guy and a bad guy. I do have very strong views on Iran and what they're doing right now, but ultimately I would say people should research a lot more.
And a bit of a final extension to that, obviously, because of this kind of boom on the right, I guess, against Israel or the Israeli government, you could say, people like Nick Fuentes and Candace Owens, what do you think about them? Do you think they're justified in their feelings of hurt and almost betrayal by the American government towards the Israeli government? Do you think they're fair in what they're saying?
I think you have to be careful with those two people because there is an incentive of the platforms they have as well. You know, you can say outrageous things, you can pull a certain amount of views, you know, and monetize your channels and things like that. I think they fight for a genuine fear, and I think they fight for a genuine upset that people have. So I think they are fully in their rights to say what they want to say and have their platforms and have their audiences. I would say Candace Owens seems to be riddled with grief over Charlie Kirk at the moment, and that is my conclusion on that. The things she says like she should explore as much as she wants. Just keep in mind, I think she's very upset at the loss of one of her best friends. But yeah.
Okay, that's it's an understandable position, I think, and I think your positions on these are very interesting, and you're obviously very educated on a lot of these. I think that's why you are doing well now that you're in the political sphere. I want to go back to what type of content you were posting when you first started on social media. I want that kind of social media journey at the beginning. Yeah,
so I mean, right at the beginning, to quickly skip through the YouTube years, I was just doing what worked for everyone else. So back in, we're talking like 2013 or so, it was challenges and the cinnamon challenge and things like that. Towards my later teens, I went down the route of vlogging more, documenting my life. And it's sad because I only just unlisted my entire YouTube channel. So, you know, maybe one day I'll put that back out, but right now I'm obviously redistributing everything. But I had hundreds and hundreds of YouTube videos of everything. And I kind of went down more of a Logan Paul kind of route of daily vlogging and things like that. I really liked him back in 2017 or so. And yeah, but then when TikTok came around, again, I started doing what everyone else was doing. I was one of the first on TikTok right after it had switched from Musical.ly.
Oh, yes.
So it was very just like witty memes. It was comedic stuff, you know, utilizing the sounds a lot. And I'd built myself from about 0 to 40,000 followers doing that. I actually had a contest with two of my friends from Mallorca, which was, I didn't want to hop on TikTok at all. I didn't want to get on it at all. I thought it was still kind of Musical.ly. And I was like, I'm doing lip syncing, like, no thanks. But I was told, no, it's different now. I was like, okay. So we had a contest to see who could get the most followers in a month. I won by a lot, about 40,000 followers, or 20,000 in the first month or so. Built it up to about 40 to 60,000 followers over 6 months, if I can remember right. But it was when lockdown hit. When lockdown hit, I was actually over in the UK. I'd been over for Christmas. I'd stayed for my best friend's birthday in mid-January. And I was in the UK when lockdown hit. And I stuck around until about early May, end of April, because I got bored, like, really. And I wanted to go back to Spain. And luckily, as a resident with all my paperwork, I was more than entitled to get on a plane at Heathrow, which was very, very weird. Because there was no one. Like, there was genuinely no one around. So much so that the only flights that day, you know, the intercom at Heathrow was in the language of the... So it's the first time I'd been in Heathrow and heard Spanish over the intercom. Because there were only Spanish people there.
Yeah.
But anyway, once I was back in Spain, I decided, I just had a realization that I, you know, for the last 10 years or so, had built up quite a good skill set of editing and storytelling. And I thought, rather than making these comedy videos, why don't I actually, I've also lived a pretty interesting life. Why don't I tell some stories about how I moved to Spain and things that have happened to me? I got majorly scammed at one point and basically bullied the banks into finding where my money was and refunding it and things like that. So I started telling these stories in quite a high quality format with editing and stuff. And it just really worked. Like, I went from 40,000 followers to 80,000 overnight.
Do you remember the first video that did really well for you? Is there one that sticks out?
Yeah. It was a video about how I did what I just said, which was how I escaped the UK to go to sunny Spain in the middle of lockdown. Right, you can understand why people would.
Yes, of course, everyone would love that.
Enjoyed that. Yeah. So that's what I did. I made this video about how, you know, I didn't want to be stuck in a rainy country with my family. You know, so I took all these precautions and made these measures, and that went viral. That did about 2 million views. But I did back then. You could only have TikToks that were a minute long.
I remember, yeah.
So it was 59 seconds, and I had a lot more to tell. So I was doing tune in for part, you know, like and follow for part 2. And I didn't realize at the time the way that strategy worked. I just genuinely needed to do a part 2. But the followers were going mad. The comments were going crazy because people were like, tag me when he does part 2, things like that. And then the second video, 500,000 views. Third video, 3.5 million, you know, and it went on for months. And I scaled to about 300,000. And then over the course of the following year, got to about 600,000. So
I see. And obviously, you went on that kind of almost generational run, if you will, of just banger after banger. And you grew to a very comfortable position, and you very well could have kept going. And you could have kept going on that path. Yet you actively chose, no, I want to do something bigger than this.
Yeah.
And you went into politics. Could you tell us a little bit more? I know you touched on it briefly. A little bit more about, in your head, that turning point in terms of the content. You realised, I want to do political content. I want to make a bigger difference than what I'm posting right now.
Yeah, it's because I thought entertainment was important, and I think it is. There's, you know, that classic Tom Cruise Oscars speech right after 9/11. Where he said, you know, a lot of us are asking, is what we do, does it matter compared to everything else going on right now?
Yeah.
And it absolutely does, because it offers escapism and, you know, it can offer a lot. And a lot of my content moved from more adventurous storytelling. Once I told every story I had to think of new things. So I was doing a lot of challenges and this is a lot of stuff I've ended up in the news about. A lot of things, and people started to realize that I was living quite an extravagant lifestyle. I didn't have loads of money, but I seemed to, I was young. I was in my early 20s, living abroad after Brexit somehow. People wanted answers to these things. And, I had my own business, my own marketing agency, things like this. So I would get a lot of DMs from people being like, how can I do what you did, right? And also people would reach out and say, thank you so much. Like, you've made me, my parents are calling me delusional for wanting to not go to university and run my own business and things like that. And I just showed my dad this video, and kind of said, take a look at that, So that was happening. And then I was never known in Spain, because Spanish market. So I never actually realized how big I was until I would come back here. And I kid you not, every single time I would come to the UK, I would have at least 3 or 4 encounters with people in shopping centres, wherever, the most bizarre things. And every time someone came up to me, it would be to shake my hand to say, you have genuinely helped me. What you do is awesome. People would stop me at the train station, be like, how can I do what you did with like limited money or whatever? So I realized that I was providing genuine value. And I did move down that more motivational route of like, I was, rather than chasing just fame and money for the sake of it, I was more like, no, I would rather have less and have people come up to me and say, you are the GOAT, and you have really helped me and thank you so much, and shake my hand rather than a bunch of screaming fans, right? So that's how I then kind of made the move when I did make the move into the political space, is I just went full in on the fact that I need to do something that is important. And now I've dropped any ambition to seek any level of popularity or anything like that. And it's all about whatever I do with my life, it has to make a difference and it has to be important. I'm very big on the idea of legacy. And what I do in my day to day to, make money and do other things, like that can be one thing. But I always need to do something that I feel like provides value.
Yeah, I really respect that. I mean, to prioritize the value you're giving to everyone over just the quick popularity grab, I think it's a very noble move, quite frankly. And I want to know a bit more. You talked a bit about the backlash and things like that. Obviously, when you started posting political content, what was, because I'm sure everyone, every political commentator goes through it, what was the backlash like? Was there any haters, any comments or messages you got?
Well, I lost a lot of friends. But, a lot of the time, those people I would consider friends, you're talking about people I went to secondary school with, people I haven't seen in a long, long time. And I think with the short form content as well, people draw conclusions very, very quickly. Yeah. Within my first 2 videos, I was being told by people that, I'm like, this is hate speech, you've fallen down some right-wing internet rabbit hole. People that I feel like might have genuinely thought they were looking out for me, kind of, you've fallen down some hole on the internet and you need to get out of it. So I lost a lot of friends. People started being very mean as well. People that I know would publicly comment on a video, like, you still have time to take this down, So there was, but I knew that was going to happen. I made an entire risk assessment in my head of all the possible things that could happen. But when it was drawn back to Charlie Kirk and the risks that he took, clearly, I was like, if I'm just going to sit on my house on the internet initially, then it won't even scratch the surface of what he was doing. So whatever, it doesn't matter.
So you don't think, in retrospect to him in comparison to Charlie Kirk, there isn't a criticism that's majorly bothers you? Or
nothing at all. Nothing that people say bothers me. If someone comes out with a certain opinion, I sometimes feel like they haven't heard mine fully. I'm very, very compassionate and understanding of the left, fan of their politics. I feel like, you know, there's what I would describe as the woke, which is I'm kind of unapologetic towards. I think I could be quite aggressive with them, but some other people that genuinely feel like they're on the right side, more than happy to speak with these people. Yeah. I will buy you dinner, you know, and we can have a chat. But no amount of hate gets to me. Okay. I'm kind of, you know, thick-skinned anyway because of everything with TikTok. The most people can do is they seem to comment on my appearance or something, you know. But honestly, I felt that if I was too afraid simply because of what people would think, there's this idea of digital footprint that we were taught about in secondary school, you know, right before we left the assembly about, you know, be careful what you do, you know, going into the world now. I don't care. I've probably, you know, even if I took everything down, the internet, things are there forever. People have downloaded my videos, whatever. If I wanted to go get a certain job or something like that, and I just completely ruined my personal profile, I don't care. Because when Charlie Kirk died, I felt ashamed that I wasn't doing what I was doing already. Yeah. You know?
Yeah, I think it's very true. And a lot of your audience is young people. What worries you about young people today, would you say?
I think there's a massive problem with the education system. Not just from the stance that I've always believed it was outdated, firstly. It took me longer to realise that it's enshrined in quite a left ideology.
Did you go to university yourself?
No. I don't even have my A-levels. Oh, wow. So I left at 17. Okay. Obviously moved to Spain, so fell out of the system. Yeah. So no. I wonder if I would have been more corrupted once I, did the A-levels and got to uni.
Yeah, let's speak a bit about the schools and the university and the education system, because I think that is quite a big talking point. What do you think is the single biggest issue today with the modern education system?
I think so I feel like, I think primary school is safe in my attacks here. I think primary school is okay. Primary school is very good for social skills, and I feel it's when you get to secondary school, and it's not that they necessarily drill in direct things of this is what you need to believe, but a lot of the time it's the culture of who they're employing. And a lot of the time I feel that teachers come across with this authority that they really shouldn't have based on their own prospects. You just have to go look at the teacher's car park to see that. I think ultimately people are pushed into this belief that you shouldn't offend anyone, you shouldn't speak out, but also that everything has to be done yourself, which is not how the world actually works, especially within business. I failed a lot when I was younger, when I first started my first businesses, because I was under the belief that everything I had to do had to be done by me, otherwise I was falling short. And then you come to realize that most CEOs and most people, especially within tech and financial tech and things like this, the CEOs, they have the ideas. They don't know anything about how their thing is programmed or anything like that. So you have to collaborate and you have to seek guidance, and you have to not cheat in what would be classed as cheating in the real world, but you have to cheat at what would be an academic level of there's this thing I'd like to know. It is not worth my time to know it. I'm just going to ask the person next to me that is clearly better than me at it, and that's a no-go in school. So there's a lot of reforms that need to happen there. And then I just think the actual system itself is not equipped for the modern world. The success that I have had, and I think God has a lot to do with it, but I have been blessed in ways that you would not believe. And a lot of it, everything I know that has allowed me to make money and progress and have a good life has not come from secondary school. It's the polar opposite of what I was taught I should be doing. I haven't pulled out my CV in over a decade, People need to understand that. People need to understand they have more options, young people. It really upsets me every single year when I see the GCSE results day videos and you've got some girl, 16-year-old girl crying, in the back of the car, like, I've done so bad. It's not, your life is not over, but they will have you believe that it is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's terrible. And a bit more on that. What do you think But what do you think is the biggest thing schools fail to teach young people nowadays?
I think that's a good question. I'm going to need to think about that.
Yeah, take your time.
They fail to teach young people that failure itself is on the road to success. I used to believe different. I used to believe that my life had to look like a perfect story, that one day I would sit down with my kids and I would be like, at 17 I moved abroad, and then it was just smooth sailing. And for a point it was, when everything happened with TikTok, and then, you know, everything I'd wanted to achieve, I did eventually, got there in the end. And I was creating this very perfect story for myself. But I've had bad things happen, things that have tarnished my, you know, reputation with certain people, or things like that, and just things that I would prefer to not be part of the storyline of my, you know, my so-called life. But it's when you need to realize that most people, most entrepreneurs that will set out, you know, something like the first 9 to 10 of their businesses will fail. As in, like, not work at all. As in, like, starting this thing, this is going to be great, this is going to be it, doesn't work. Going into the next one, okay, this time I've learned, I'm a better person, failed. And then, you know, and then the third time, this time is definitely going to be different. You know, it's like 3 years down the line, I'm better now, I'm in a better position, you know, I've educated myself a bit, failed, you know. And if people realize that that's actually how the world works, the reason we put rocket ships into space is because we did a lot of trial and error in the labs. And then even once we actually had the rocket ship, sadly, you know, they blew up and people died in the process. But now we have Elon Musk with Starlink, and we can, you know, and we have the missions to Mars that we're planning and things like that. That wouldn't have happened if we didn't have a few rockets blowing up in the atmosphere and unfortunately people dying in the process. But that is how the world really works.
And there are quite a few people with this view and this growing distrust in our current education system, and obviously you decided to take yourself out of it and do your own thing and make your own way. For people who feel similar, who are in this position, maybe about to finish secondary school, or maybe they have done their A-levels and they're considering university or not, what would you recommend? Obviously, each individual person is different, but what would you recommend, generally speaking, these people do if they don't want to go into this traditional education system?
They should seek wisdom elsewhere, in the sense that you might not know what you want to do with your life. You should explore. And I'm fully behind the idea of, you know, if you want to become a doctor, you definitely need to go to university, right? Definitely go do traveling for a year before. Like, are you crazy? Like, if you're from a small town and then you've done secondary school and then you've moved to Portsmouth to do your, you know, degree or whatever, and then you come out of that and then you're straight into work. You know, I've met people that are just so keen on, like, yeah, I'm actually saving up for a house at the moment, you know, and they want to buy a house in, like, my hometown and drop, you know, 300 grand on a 1-bedroom apartment or something like that. And I'm like, but you told me last week you've never spent a currency outside of pounds and euros, so you've never been anywhere outside of the Schengen zone, so what are you talking about buying a house? How do you even know that you want to live here? You know, if you're going to, you know, do a degree and you're pretty set on that, go traveling, go see the world. And when I say traveling, I don't mean just going on a bunch of holidays. I mean, go to the other end of the globe, and that could be Southeast Asia, like Thailand, which seems to be very popular at the moment, but also go into deep America and hang out there for a few weeks, get an Airbnb, speak to people, learn what it's like to be an American citizen, how their healthcare works and things like this, and get perspective on the world. I came out of secondary school the same as everyone else. I wasn't necessarily more intellectual. I did feel like I was aged up a little bit. I feel like sometimes people would throw things or say things at me that I'm like, that's a bit childish for where we're at. I felt like teachers would speak to me in a way where I'd be like, don't speak to me like that. But ultimately, I was the same as everyone else. It was only once I threw myself into the deep end and traveled and heard other people's stories, learned about other people's lives, that I really understood, oh, I really don't know what I want, you know? And I had to kind of figure that out. Seek wisdom. And wisdom exists outside of traditional systems a lot more. People should be careful of grifters and certain courses and things like that. But the internet has provided the means for, if you want to run your own marketing agency, there is an abundance of people that you can pay, $5,000 to. Granted, it's quite a lot of money, but, it's not 50 grand. And they will teach you within 3 months, not 4 years, how to level up and do what they're doing. And you'll do it along the way. It'll be like you start right now. You're not going to wait and start. So, seek wisdom.
I think it's very good advice. And I want to talk a bit more about the point you said on how to spend your money. And I want to talk a bit more about the economy. And I know you have quite strong views about capitalism and the benefits of capitalism. Very simply, what do you think about capitalism?
I believe that human beings work well when they're incentivized. I don't think we necessarily work well under pressure. I don't think we necessarily work well when we're forced or scared. We've seen regimes like that all over the world. It doesn't ultimately work. There is no talking point on communism because in most countries where communism still exists, you're not really allowed to leave, right? China their idea is communism. It's not really operating like a communist country, right? It's kind of cute how, the military is like, oh yeah, we serve the people and stuff like that. And it's all, fair enough. It doesn't operate like a full communist country.
And would you say capitalism works well in Britain today?
Yes, absolutely. It's why we have what we have. We are the people of Shakespeare. We are the people of the steam engine, of the jet engine. All of this stuff is about optimization, getting stuff from A to B. I don't think we invented the steam engine to make it easier for people to travel. I think we invented the steam engine so we could move resources to better places quicker so we could sell them, right? And it's all about incentivizing people. People work better for a company and even themselves when they see themselves progressing. And I think to be able to enjoy those fruits of your labor and really sit there one day, in a house that, you own with a family around you and your kids, and it's Christmas Day and your kids have these new video game consoles, and you can be like, I did that. It's not because we live in some system where we all share and we all whatever. It's like, no, I did that for my family.
And how far do you think Britain should take this capitalist ideology? Obviously, fundamentally, we are capitalists. I mean, we are one of the founding countries of capitalism.
Yes.
But there's a big debate right now on the balance between us being a welfare state, the benefits we give to people, our taxation, the public service we give to people, balancing that out with capitalism and lower tax rates and things like that. Where do you think the balance should be in terms of that?
I'll tell you something. So something that I actually believe in quite a lot, which might surprise a lot of people. I do think it needs some reform and we need to revisit it, once Nigel gets into power. But this new renters bill,
yes,
right? It was very similar when I lived in Canada. And again, this is why people need to travel and explore and seek wisdom. It was very similar there. I was blown away, and Canada is really suffering as a country. A year there was long enough, unfortunately. I would have loved to stay. A beautiful place, kind of very similar to the US. The economy is dreadful. I was very surprised to learn there that if you're looking for a property, firstly, you never pay any real estate agent fee. It always goes to the landlord. Secondly, they can't do deposits or anything like that. They can't request deposits or whatever. They can request, a month's additional rent and stuff for security. But once you're in, it's actually very hard to get you out. And I understand from a landlord's point of view why that might seem unattractive. But as someone who was renting, it was, especially on the other side of the world, it was very, very nice to know that if I wanted to suddenly get a pet, I could do that, and the landlord can't really say anything about it. That the only reason he would be able to get me to leave is if he was moving in himself or doing some redesigning. And then even after you're redesigning, you have to invite me back before you invite anyone else. So unless I was damaging the property, there was no real way to get me out. And that I actually do believe in, because there are so many investment instruments that exist. You can download eToro or something like that, and you can invest directly into Tesla or gold or oil. You know, I have a position in oil at the moment in the last few days.
I'm sure you're doing well.
You know, there we go. You know, but there are so many investment opportunities, so many things you can do, government bonds, etc. So the thing with housing and being a landlord is you mess with people's lives. And I draw a line there a little bit. A family could have moved into a house, enrolled their kids in school, been there for 5-6 years. They got friends, things like that. And then the landlord just decides that he wants to, you know, not even sell, just get the people out to up the prices and find someone new and renovate it, or maybe turn it into an Airbnb or something like that. You can't do that. I don't think it's moral to uproot an entire family life, have them have to relocate, maybe even consider new schools. You know, the dog is going to have stress because it's a new, just because you want to make a bit more money. So that I do believe in.
And a bit more on that. Is that the one economic policy you would change, or is there something else you would change? Let's say you had all the power in the world, you were prime minister right now, you can change one economic policy. What would that be?
I think our government should operate as a business. I think, government need to realise that they serve at the will of the people, by the consent of the people, right? I really believe in what's written in the Magna Carta, that everyone is subject to the law. What's written in the Declaration of Independence, that, if a people feel that their government no longer serves them, the people have the right to remove that government and install a better one. So the first thing I would do is find a way to genuinely make people's lives better. And I know that's easier said than done, but we need to explore investment into other countries. We need to explore doing things that's going to generate income aside from just raising taxes. It's such an easy thing to do, to just raise taxes and make more money. And there are things we are doing so wrong. We are, as a country, we're very instant gratification, okay? We had loads of oil at one point. We were drilling like crazy. We were doing very, very well. What did we do? We just sold it off and pumped the money into just fixing things right now, is what we did. And now it's all gone. And now we can't even support our economy, and we have to, get the Bank of England to print more money to buy bonds, which puts us into, so that's one thing. That devalues the pound. When we don't want to do that, we're putting out all these bonds, getting into crazy amounts of debt, which people think their taxes fund the economy. No, it doesn't. It pretty much funds the debt interest, and that's about it. We are in a hole that we are going to struggle to get out of, and we're going to hit a point, like anyone with personal debt, whatever, where you are like finished. You got to go bankrupt, eventually. So I would have us make more money. I would generally try to move to a place where eventually, in 100 years or less, within our lifetimes, where we can have a zero income tax country. And these are things that are a lot easier said than done, right?
Of course.
It's the policy of other parties to just start saying things that make people feel good. But I would. There's probably some more I would think of.
And just to finish up, just because we're running a bit short on time now, I want to offer you some very quick fire questions.
Yeah.
Where do you think Britain is heading in the next 5 years? What would your predictions be?
If we can get Nigel in, we're heading to a much safer country, and a country that might not fix up right away, but people will be proud, and people will move back that have moved abroad, and people will genuinely rally behind fixing up the country. There will actually be hope restored.
What's the biggest threat to the right wing in Britain right now?
Lies. I think lies from the left. I think the left do this thing where, especially as we've seen with the Epstein files, if what they really wanted to be true doesn't end up being true, then they just make it up anyway, and they'll Photoshop photos. The amount of photos I've seen of Trump with his granddaughter, Kai Trump, and they're claiming that that's some girl from some child, that he did inappropriate things with. It's bizarre.
And for you, what do you want to achieve with your content long term?
I am not trying to embarrass anyone, trying to get like a quick win or anything like that. I am going for people that are unsure and on the fence, especially people within our age range. Young people that aren't sure, that are on the fence, and are looking for guidance and looking for that opportunity to have open debate. I'm not trying to fight a war of the left and the right. That term has shifted as well, of what that actually means. I'm not in this for an attack. I'm in this for genuine progress, and I'm going for those people that are on the fence.
Well, thank you very much. And finally, where can people find you after this?
Just you can Google me, Ben Matthew Saunders. I'll come up. You can find all my links, but also Ben Internet on all socials.
Well, thank you very much, Ben. It's been very insightful, and I'm sure all of you will find it very insightful as well. I'm very excited to see what people say when this goes out. And thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, and thank you everyone who's watching at home. This has been the first episode of Young Right Views. We're hoping to do this probably once every 2 weeks. I think this has been a phenomenal first guest. Maybe we can have you again some other time to discuss some more political points. Thank you very much again, and thank you all very much for watching. Thank you.